what led me to go to India the first time, and I've now been there more than 60 times. And in fact, one of my hobbies is I lead small, joyful tour groups to India and share my love of India and the beauty of India. Because of course, while you see a lot of the negative about India, as you do about any country, India is one of the friendliest places. It's one of the most creative. It's one of the most colorful, literally colorful places I've ever been. So, but the first time I went really came out of a moment where I shifted from believing there's no God, no soul, no spirit. I shifted out of that. And what happened was I woke up one morning in Montreal. I was living in a little rented room. I was working at the National Film Board of Canada as a researcher and as a production manager and as an assistant director. I hadn't yet made my first film. And I woke up and I had the shocking thought that there were parts of myself I didn't like. And I'd never thought that before. I wasn't a very, at that point, I wasn't a very conscious young man. I mean, I was conscious enough. I'd already been to the Mississippi and done civil rights voter registration with Stokely Carmichael and others. But that thought was a shocking thought. And what happened briefly was I sat up on the edge of my bed and I heard myself say out loud, you know, sometimes words come out and we hear them. I heard myself say, what do I do about this? And I heard a deep inner voice that was all loving and all calming. That's pretty amazing. All loving, all calming. Ooh, I'd never heard that voice within myself, which was the voice of my soul. I came to understand, even though I didn't believe in a soul. And it said, well, Paul, if you really want to look at yourself more carefully, you might want to get away from the environment you grew up in. And I said out loud, like it was this truly strange conversation. It was in the flow. I said out loud, where do I go? And that inner voice said, India. That was the end of the first conversation. So I got myself to India, and my girlfriend and I, we loved each other a lot. She didn't want me to leave, Trisha, and I didn't want to leave. And I got there and I worked on a film, which is how I paid my way over. And I got my first letter from her and I excitedly opened it. And the first line was, Dear Paul, I've moved in with Henry. And I was shattered. I was devastated. And somebody said, why don't you try meditation for the heartbreak? That led me to go to the Maharishi's ashram in Rishikesh. And the gate was locked and they called someone who spoke English. The guard on the gate didn't speak English. And I said, I've come to learn meditation. And he said, I'm sorry, the ashram is closed because the Beatles and their wives are here. And I was a fan, but I didn't even know they were in India. And I said, you have to teach me. And I told him that I was in a heartbreak and suffering. Probably I cried, I can't remember. And he said, I'll go ask the Maharishi. I won't be able to come back for 2 or 3 hours, but I'll send you a cup of chai. So off he went, and someone came down to the gate with a pot of hot water and chai and, you know, milk and sugar. And I sat cross-legged on the ground and waited 2 or 3 hours. And then the same man, Raghvendra, came back and said, I'm sorry, the Maharishi says not at the present time. And I absolutely love language, because I find in language there are signposts for how to traverse this life better. And, you know, if he hadn't said not at the present time, I don't know what I would have said. I might have wandered away. I said, can I wait? And I waited outside the gate for 8 days to get in, not because the Beatles were there. It wasn't good news they were there at first, because I was suffering and needed something. I needed a salve, a balm. Anyway, I learned meditation. 8 days later, it took less than 5 minutes. I did my first meditation, 30 minutes. I knew nothing about this stuff. And I came out of the meditation and the agony was gone. The knife in the heart was gone. I still longed after Trisha. It took me 2 years to get over her, but the agony was gone in one 30-minute meditation. And I came out of the meditation room and I was stoned. I was high. I was in a state of bliss. George Harrison later said to me when we were sitting talking, he said, I get higher meditating than I ever did on drugs. And I knew what that meant because I had also done drugs in my effort to be more conscious, actually. Drugs for me, LSD, psilocybin, mescaline, marijuana, they were always for me about how to go inward and find inner peace. They were never about partying. Although smoking a joint and throwing a frisbee in the park was always great fun, right? So I come out of the meditation, I'm in a state of bliss, and I'm wandering through the ashram, and I'm not even thinking Beatles, not even in my mind. And as I'm walking along, I look over to the right and I see John Lennon about 150 feet away, and I walk over and it's not a thought. I don't know how to express this except to say I found myself curving in their direction, and I'm halfway to Lennon, and I can see the back of McCartney's head. I can't see anyone else because of the foliage. And halfway over, I notice, oh, my heart's beating faster, but I was completely calm in this altered state. And I got over to the table, and there was the four Beatles and their three wives, and Jane Asher, Paul's girlfriend, and Donovan, the Scottish folk singer, and Mal Evans, their roadie, Mia Farrow, the American actress. There were 12 people sitting there. They were talking, and I didn't want to interrupt, and I was very calm. And I was standing 2 feet from John and 2 feet from Paul. And they realized someone was standing there, and they paused, and John looked up at me, and I just said, may I join you? Very calm. And he said, sure, mate, pull up a chair. And then Paul turned to me and said, come and sit here. And he pulled a chair over, and I sat down. And then 3 things happened that were magical. Magic is, as defined in the Oxford Etymological Dictionary, number 23 out of 25 meanings, as that which is real, but we as yet do not understand. Isn't that beautiful? Magic, that which is real, but we as yet do not understand. And so 3 magical things happened. The first was that as soon as I sat down, to my shock, honestly, I heard this scream in my head, eek, it's the Beatles. Now, I've never uttered those words in my life till that moment. In fact, I saw them live in Toronto in 1964. I wasn't screaming at all. I had my ears cupped. I was just trying to hear them over the screams, right? And their music had already changed my life, right? We danced to their music in the early 60s. And then when I heard Tomorrow Never Knows, the last song on the Revolver album, that was the beginning of me thinking. The song was part of the song was turn off your mind and float downstream. You are not dying. You are not dying. Go towards the light. And I'm thinking, what are they talking about? And that was my first curiosity about, is there something inner that they're talking about? Anyway, so I sit down, I hear this scream in my head, and before I have a chance to think, and this is really important, and you both know this as artists yourself, that the inspiration comes from the heart and soul. The mind is I work with a lot of young people in various ways, and sometimes something like this comes up, and I say, this is a great computer. It's a shitty guidance system. This, your heart, is a great guidance system. It's a shitty computer. And in fact, I did work with a teacher in consciousness, a very remarkable teacher in consciousness many years ago. And he said, if I have to sum up all my experiences and all my books and all my interviews and all my lectures into one sentence, he said, I'd say it's all about integrating the head and the heart. Isn't that worth its weight in gold, right? So what happened was that as soon as the scream happened, before I had a chance to think, which means being distracted by mind, John turns to me, and in his Lennon wonderful, wry, digging, brilliant wit, lovely man, he says, so you're American then? And it's not a compliment. It's like, you're from the colonies, right? You're American. We're the British. We owned the world, but you're, and so it was not, he was teasing me. He said, so you're American then? And I said, no, Canadian. And he turns to the rest of the group and he says, ah, he's from one of the colonies. And now we're all laughing. And he turns back to me and he says, again, playing with me, toying with me. He said, so you're still worshiping Her Highness then? And I said, no, not personally. And then Ringo and Paul start teasing me about having the Queen on our money. And I say, well, we may have the Queen on our money, but hey, she lives with you guys. So we're all laughing. At which point, Cynthia Lennon, John's first wife, down at the end of the table, she says, come on, chaps, leave the poor guy alone. He's just arrived. I mean, obviously they were a very, humorous and teasing group. Anyway, I spent a week sitting with them and they just took me into their group. And I think they just took me into their group because I genuinely didn't want anything from them. I actually didn't think of asking for an autograph or a photograph, and I could have had photographs with them and autographs because they literally took me into their group. I didn't think of it. It wasn't like I thought of it and thought, no, I shouldn't ask. I literally didn't think about it. So, what were they like? They were remarkably down to earth. In the week I spent with them, there was no star stuff. There was no star attitude. There was no star self-importance. Unbelievably modest, down to earth, each of them different, each of them with a wonderful sense of Liverpudlian humor, the kind of teasing humor that is apparently comes from Liverpool. And they were very generous and kind with me. That was it.